Hello, everybody. Welcome to another session. Today I'm going to talk about can Revit build a complex model? Now, one of the biggest glaring issues within Revit, uh, most user, if you're a novice user, you probably just say, okay, Revit is great. But some of the experienced user, working with Revit since the beginning, it's not very intuitive to build a very complicated model. Most often what happens is that when you build certain model, it looks very blocky, but that's okay. There's a purpose of why Revit is blocky. It's because when you're building a database, you want to keep the detail part very, very primitive. Now, in most cases, what user would tend to do is that they would import CAD into Revit. Sometimes what a user would do is that they would download a SketchUp file and they would import that SketchUp files into Revit. Now, the big issue with that is you're going to see a bunch of lines. Later on, I'm going to show you in a couple of slides later, you'll notice why CAD import sometimes may not work. The other thing I always find with Revit file is that you can always get very unpredictable file size. And sometimes when you're doing void extrusion and trying to cut into a geometry, it will generate errors. It's something that a lot of users dealt with on a daily basis, but I'm just basically illustrating that there are a lot of glaring issues. When you look at the timeline of modeling since Revit first released in 2000, and then up to 2010 or 2019, you haven't seen any progression in terms of the primitive um, modeling. So the same tools that use in the past still exist in 2019. When you first like adaptive component was first released in 2010, so it gives you a little bit more flexibility, but since then it's haven't changed that much. So you can see that based on the first release up to 2019, there's a lot of tools that is not very intuitive, and Autodesk just keep using the same tools for the past 19 years, and you would thought that they would release something that is a little bit more intuitive, but at the same time right now that's the glaring issues and we just have to stick with it. Now, one of the things that we always have to remind Autodesk is that designers are not engineers. Okay, I'm not designing like engineers. A lot of the tools, like how they model stuff, are very engineer driven. As a designer, all you want to do is that we want to say, okay, make this two surface join together, and we don't care about what errors. Like you have to get it, you have to get it so perfect that it has to join. For designer, they don't care. All they care about is that if there is some issues, let's say the tolerance is not matching up, you want the program itself to kind of deliver the result that you wanted. But unfortunately, with Revit, it's always the case, right? I put up these two images because it's funny. Yeah, for engineer, if you're not tired, you're not doing it right. Yeah, that's the thing about Revit program is that when you start doing modeling, sometimes you do have this issue. Okay, for the dream and reality. Now, a lot of time, what I always find it very, very particular is that Autodesk will always market Revit to be, oh yeah, it's a parametric tool, so you can build geometry in Revit. But when it comes to families, okay, this one is a family. It's a default family from out of the box. When you look at it, it looks very primitive. Now, the issue with this is that if you want to build, let's say, a car, RPC cars, there is no way of doing it. So you kind of have to pay, like, Arch Vision for like additional cars, etc. But for for us Revit user, this is kind of a limitation. So we're basically stuck with either you cannot do it or you just use whatever is out of the box. And to me, this is a big issue. Now, why is SketchUp so popular? Now, I like SketchUp. The reason why I like SketchUp is because it has a lot of content. When you search for, like, let's say anything that is non architectural related, for example, space shuttle, you get like 20, 30, 40, or 50 results. Okay, everybody modeling their own stuff, shared, and you get some of the most awesome models available. Unfortunately, for Revit, we don't have that kind of infrastructure. So when you look at places, I always look at Revit City because it kind of reminds me of SketchUp, warehouses. Now I kind of did this kind of like a test where I look at all the cars available in Revit City. Now, out of all the 180 cars, about approximately more than, let's say, 150, 170, they all CAD imported, and only less than 10 are natively built within Revit. So you kind of ask yourself, why is this? The tools are there, they're not very intuitive. So most of the time when you want to do this, really curvatures and all that stuff, it's not possible. Now, this is a problem moving forward. If you want your office to basically use Revit from design until, let's say, construction, this is where Autodesk has to fix this issue. Excuse me. The reason why I'm going to go back here, why SketchUp is so popular is that you have a lot of content. Okay, content can be downloaded. It doesn't matter if it has to be BIM or not. Excuse me. The contents are there. When you look at Revit, you got nothing. Okay, Revit City does have a mixed bag of CAD imports and native Revit. Now, for designers, they don't care about parametrics. They don't care about if things are right or not. All we care about is that if there's a content, you're just going to plunk it into the model, and all they want to do is just populate things so that it looks really realistic. It's something that Autodesk has not provided. Now, one of the things about CAD import dilemma is that when you first use it for let's say Revit, you'll see there's a bunch of lines. Okay, you see that lines, it's always going to be there. Now, it looks nice when you render it, but unfortunately, if you want to use it for, let's say, hidden views, shaded views, it looks like a big blob of mess. So how do you fix it? So what I typically do is that I export those CAD imports into Revit as a DWG. You have to use AutoCAD. Okay. Within AutoCAD, what I did is that I would open AutoCAD and then I would use the command called the edge. Okay, just to hide the edge. Probably later on I should demonstrate how that's done. Now, once you've done that, and then when you import those CAD back into Revit, Revit will still, it looks good. So all the lines are gone, and you can now use it as Revit family. So AutoCAD still has its place. I used it constantly because it helps us model things properly, and then you can also help kind of break apart what component is what layer, so that when you import into Revit, you have a better way of controlling things. Most often when someone import CAD, it doesn't have a layer in it. It makes it very difficult to kind of control it. Whereas if you export out into AutoCAD, break it up, put it into the correct layers, and then when you import them back into Revit, then you have much more control, much more layer to deal with. But at the same time, you're allowed to give them material, give them line weights, etc. Makes it a little bit easier for the user. Okay. Now I asked myself, there must be a better way to build this, right, natively inside Revit. So I kind of experiment for several months, and I found that you can actually build it inside Revit, but you kind of have to use a very simple method. So what I do is that I use points, and then I use the method to connect the dots. Okay, so the first thing you have to do is that you take the points, and then you use the command called the spline through points, and it give you this line. Once you've done that, you have a bunch of, let's say, lines, right? Once you have the skeleton built, now the next thing you do is that you basically connect those surfaces, and it becomes a model. Okay, so that concludes that part of the presentation, but right now I'm just going to go into the show and tell. Okay, now earlier on I mentioned about how you can use AutoCAD for Revit. So let's say, for example, you have a car, okay, that looks like a blobbing mess like that. So let's say, for instance, you want to hide surfaces in this particular car. How do you do that? So first thing first is that I would turn off all the layers. Let's say I'm going to pick a body. Okay, that looks like that. Now the mesh itself is going to, you just have to use the explode button. I just use the explode. And the next thing you want to use, okay, let's say I'm going to orbit that. You type in the command called edge. Okay, what you do is that just pick a midpoint, and you notice that it starts to hide itself. Okay, very simple, very intuitive. It depends on how big is your the mesh triangulation. This could take you hours if you want to do it correctly. But in most cases, it's just a couple clicks away here and there. Once you are satisfied with how you want to look, right? Let's say you hide all the lines, you can always save it. Now, keep in mind is that I always like to turn this on. Okay, let's see, you have that. Now within Revit, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go into the new family. I'm going to go generic model. And I'm going to insert that particular CAD model. I'm just going to look at the size. There we go. I always turn this off, preserve. You want to say, all layers. And when you go into here, and voila. When you look at it, you notice that the lines are hidden now. You can make it, you could spend hours doing this just to hide all the lines so that you only see what you want to see. Okay? Can be very tedious. So this is kind of like a method. If you want to use the CAD method, you can do that. But if you want to build it within Revit, I'll show you the next method. Basically, just show and tell. Now, the first project, when I first built this, I was looking at how to build a Volkswagen. All right, I know that Volkswagen Camper. So this was my first task, is that I want to build this Volkswagen sort of, very iconic car. Okay. So what I did is that I scoured through the internet, especially I go to Revit City. And what happened with Revit City is that someone actually uploaded a Volkswagen Camper. Okay, I'm just going to go download. Let's see, Camper. See if it has it there, but if it's not there, it's one of the cars. So you could actually use the keyword called car. And what I did is that I just download that, and then I start building it. Oh, camper van. Okay, that's all. That's all I have. Okay. It's there. You just have to look. I think it's under car. So let's say under car, and then you go to the. I know, I know some user, especially bid managers, say that do not use Revit City, okay, because it's trash or whatever. It's not fit their standard. But the thing is that you kind of have to think about designer's point of view. For me, designer, this is pretty awesome for a website to have all this content. Oh, there you go, right there, Volkswagen. So this is what I want to build. Okay. Now when you download this, it looks like AutoCAD stuff. Again, it's like a CAD import. So to me, it's not very useful to do it within CAD. So what I did is that I just built it on my own. So here I'm just gonna open up the course level. Now I did this more um, in different phases, so that I just want to test out the file size. Um, so this is what I have, very primitive, right? So it has no details except for just the body itself. Now, the the only thing that's complicated is the roof and this shell right here. The rest are just basically built with uh, just the regular tools from Revit. So if you know the primitive tools, that's all we use. That's all I use. So all of this are very primitive. So what I did for this one, show you, it's just basically a loft, right? Edit sweep, and then what happens is that there's a lot of void to cut into those particular geometry. Now this part, I'm just gonna go edit. Now this skin, all I have is that it's just a skeleton. Okay, this is the skeleton. And what I did here is that I basically create surfaces based on using this particular geometry. Once I've done that, then the next thing I do is that I use what's known as the void. Now, the unfortunate thing about adaptive void is that once you cut into it, you can no longer select it unless you select the geometry. And that's the thing. Let's see. Let's get a height that. Let's see if I. Nope. There we go. Well, you can't see the void itself. That's the unfortunate thing about adaptive components that once you cut an object, that void will hide, and there's no way you can use the same void over and over. Let's say, for example, you have another this. Let's say this two surface, you want to use the same void to cut through it. It won't do it, unfortunately. So you have to recreate that, recut it, and it's just not very intuitive. But unfortunately, it is what it is. So this is kind of like the things that we have to live with if you're using Revit, the adaptive component. Okay, the rest is just basically this just the standard, just the loft. Again, just use the simple, and then what I did is that I just basically use the sweep. Yeah, I always get sweep and loft kind of mixed up because I know that I'm coming from 3D Studio Max and AutoCAD background. So sweep and loft, if I kind of use it interchangeably, they're meaning the same thing. Okay. Yeah, I wish Autodesk would keep them all the same. So rather call it sweep, call it loft, because 3D Max and AutoCAD, that's the language that they use. But if for this one, it just yeah, yeah. Don't mind me. I'm just nitpicking, but So by building this, I'm just basically building this course level, and you notice that the size differences is quite substantial. So what I did is that the first step, I just built the course, medium, where I added a couple of families. So here's the medium. The file size is not that bad. I mean, 3 MB. Now this one only contains two adaptive components, so it's not that bad. So here I just add like more cuts to it, more detail to that. So it's not that bad. And once I get into the more of a detail portion, the size just double up. So what I did is that I just added the interiors, license plate, etc., and then doing a lot of that geometry. It's not very spectacular. It's just a simple geometry and stuff like that. And then now the file set just ballooned up. This what I just did. What I did here is that this grill, it's adaptive to that surface so that it could stick on that face. So that's all I did, and then that basically just blew up the file size by almost double the size. So for me, it just makes no sense. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm a little bit sick, but just bear with me. So at the end of the day, you could create a Revit kind of vehicle using very, very generic kind of a way to do it, and then this is kind of like how it looks like. So this is the first step that I did. Now the next step I want to challenge myself is that okay, this one I kind of do it more of 80% primitive modeling and then 20% adaptive. What if you want to do the complete opposite, where you do almost like 90% adaptive and then only 10% is basically the primitive. So the second project I did was this Ford Coupe. Okay, so I'm just gonna open it up. I won't go too detail into how I build it. It's basically the same basic principle. So what I did here is that I just build it based on components. Okay. Now, one of the glaring issues with adaptive component is that once you get to edges, like this sort of edges, it's very difficult to hide lines. So there's a lot of compromise in building a lot of this particular setup. Now, one of the biggest issue I always have or struggling with Revit adaptive component is that when you pick line, let's say I'm gonna I say category. Let's say if I want to pick, let's say that surface, that line, that line, that line, that line, that line, that line, and then want to create a form, it does it for me. But if I want to pick, let's say for example, here, 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 with that, depending on how many you pick, when you create form, and right now it's fine, it doesn't do it. So let's say I'm going to delete this. Say if I want to pick and choose those surfaces, you notice that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. So you kind of have to make sure you pick the right line. Sometimes you pick the wrong one, and just what happens is that it tells you there's an error, it doesn't want to work. Most time it just saying okay, it works. So it's kind of like a 50-50. So most of the time I just it's kind of like trial and error. There's no way you can get it to kind of work perfectly like 100% of the time. And this to me is very concerning if you are building a lot of adaptive component kind of you know modeling, and you always get this message unable to create form. 9 out of 10, I always get this stupid error. Unfortunately, there's no way of troubleshooting what's wrong. Okay, you could build like the most uh, simple kind of modeling, you still get this error. That's the unfortunate thing about adaptive component. Okay, so it's a lot of trial and error. Okay, um, but at the end of the day, you see why certain things just doesn't work. I had to live with a compromise. So what I did is that you start to see that line. Okay, sometimes I want to hide this line, but unfortunately, there's not that much I can do about it. Overall, you can build it. Okay, I'm not gonna tell people saying that don't do it, but you know what? The imagination's yours, so you could just use that adaptive component, the technique that I've shown you. Right, very simple. Just pick your points and then just spline it. All right, so this one turns out to be good. Okay, I'm kind of happy with it. It's not a bad model because it's only like 9 MB. And as you can see, if I start putting in, let's say, interiors and then, do more adaptive component, this size could balloon up to 20 megs. So this was okay, 9 megs, it's not bad. Now, once I've done this, I just want to try myself and see if I can build another more sophisticated one where it could basically flex. So the next step I did was that I built myself a DeLorean, okay, within Revit. So this is the DeLorean that I built. Now you have to look at the size. Okay, it's very crazy. This size is 26 megabytes. Okay, so this was the original kind of a thing without the Back to the Future kind of a motif or modeling. So in here, what I did is that I just built this. Again, there's a lot of adaptive components, right? It's adaptive. The seats are adaptive. So I just built it in pieces. So this is the first part, and then I built slowly. Okay. So in here, the nicest thing about it is that I also add a parameter which allows your vehicle to flex. So I want to have there we go, right? That's the kind of like the flying DeLorean. And then if I want to one side of my door to close or open, there we go. So this one turns out to be nice. Okay, 20 megs is a little bit overkill. Now, if I start modeling with the retrofit, okay, the size balloon up to 100 megs. So this is why I mentioned before, it just doesn't make sense, right? Because how can you jump all the way to six, like almost triple the size? So with the retrofit, so I'm just gonna open it up. So I'm just basically using the same car, and then just adding in a couple of retrofits to the back, and it like a lot of it is adaptive components. And yeah, I don't know. It just the unfortunate thing is that it ballooned up, so this becomes kind of like not really meant for use in a model, but just more for me to test out the complexity of the car. So this is yeah, it took me about roughly 3 weeks to build it. A lot of components are actually this original model was downloaded from SketchUp. So what I did with the SketchUp is that I took the model. I have to use the AutoCAD to break up a lot of the pieces into subcomponents, so that I have to model each of those components piece by piece. So you notice that in a lot of this stuff, I just basically break it up based on what the SketchUp model originally was, how it was built. Okay? I was adding a couple of details in there just to make it fun. So now some people is going to ask me like, okay, are you going to have this available downloaded somewhere? Maybe in the future if someone actually wants this. Okay, but for now, I'm just going to test it out and just want to make sure that a lot of the stuff is working. Now, when I uploaded this file to this website, Autodesk Live. Actually, no, it's I don't know if it's live or Autodesk 3D online or Autodesk Online 3D viewer. I think it's viewer. There we go. So I did upload the file. Okay, so let's say I'm going to go up design views. Okay, so here I just now one of the things when I built the adaptive component. I'm just gonna go in here. Come on, zoom in. You notice that there's missing surfaces. That's the unfortunate thing about adaptive components, that it doesn't know which side is positive and which side is negative. Now, if you work with 3ds Max, it will tell you which side um, of your surface is going to be the positive and which side is the negative. So when it comes to like rendering, like fast, quick rendering, it would basically avoid the negative side of the surface. So in this case, Autodesk Viewer, what happened is that when I upload it, you notice that a lot of the surfaces are missing. Is because when you look at underneath, you notice that there's materials here, but when you look it up, there's nothing there. So that's the unfortunate thing about Revit. That's the limitation. Adaptive Components is that it does not know which side's positive, which side's negative. I wish there's a tool, or hopefully in the future, Autodesk, if they listen to my video, is that hopefully they build something in the future so that um, any user using Adaptive Component to build stuff, they're able to say which side is negative and which side is positive. So when you upload to this, you don't have this issue. Now, Autodesk did provide a temporary fix to this. I have to go to the console and then type in some sort of a word that they asked me to do. I tested that it works, but the problem is that if you given this to average user, you're not going to know. So hopefully in the future, Autodesk has some sort of fix, but unfortunately right now, it is what it is. If you are planning to build this in a very complicated geometry, upload it to Autodesk Viewer, yeah, you're gonna get some missing surfaces. Just warning to those people. Okay, it's your model is not wrong. It's just that Autodesk has problem online viewing your file. All right, so that's my fourth project. So I kind of like asked myself, like, okay, what if I could do more? Let's say a person or something. Let's say building something more person, like smaller scale kind of a thing. Is it possible? So what I did is that I basically built myself Darth Vader. This is still work in progress, okay? So I kind of asked myself, okay, let's build Darth Vader inside Revit. So let's see, Darth Vader. It's going on pretty slowly, but I'm trying to build it as detailed as possible. So here's basically just a sample of what you could build inside Revit. So all the mass and everything, it's all depth components. This one, I think it's probably like the only thing that is primitive is this dials here because it's quite simple. And anything with symmetry, I usually use the primitive tools, but anything with surface, curve, and etc., I would use the adaptive component. So this is a work in progress. Hopefully I have it done. Now, the other thing about the surfaces, the adaptive components, that sometimes when you pick the surfaces, it wants to do like an overreach. Okay, this one was built previously. It wasn't like this, but unfortunately, this particular one, I kind of have to, go in here and adjust, how much this pad is going to go up. So I could go back here and say, okay, here I want to move. Okay, let's say move. Let's say 40. That's what it looks like. And then when I load it back in here, that's what I get. Now you kind of have to play around because sometimes you're gonna have the surface warping and stuff like that. Unfortunately, it is what it is. Okay. Later on, I'm just gonna build the cape around this, so it's gonna hide the model. So a lot of time, adaptive components is not gonna be the cleanest model you're gonna build. It's pretty similar to how 3D Max, how you build stuff. It's not gonna be clean all the time, so you try to do it as best as you can to hide those imperfections. Similarly, I'm going to do the same thing with this. But overall, it looks pretty good. So Revit can build complicated geometry. The only thing you kind of have to watch out for is that all these lines, unfortunately, there's nothing much you can do about that. Hopefully in the future, Autodesk will build something that is totally revolutionary. It's something for modeler like myself, I like to build. okay, just to test out the capability of Revit. So hopefully you find this presentation pretty interesting. Okay, I did this more to kind of test out what I can do with Revit, because for so many years we always see dynamos and all this great looking building using a lot of the stuff, but what about details, like going down to the nitty gritty stuff that I don't think Dynamo can actually build? A lot of the stuff is kind of like a trial and error. Okay, so if you want to build it in Dynamo, you can try. I don't know if it will work. Okay, if someone has that expertise building in Dynamo, great. I'd like to talk to you. But in most cases, like any complicated geometry that don't have a form, it's just very organic, then yes, you kind of have to use the your own kind of imagination how to build this model. So yes, if you like this, give it a thumbs up. So hopefully in the future I'll build you more other interesting video. Thank you. Bye bye.